Welcome to the Supreme Love Project, where you learn to love supremely so you can live supremely. This is a Power Hour. This is the place where you can get the information you need to heal the terrors in your soul and launch a revolution in your life. Get ready. Take notes. Now, here's your host, Janine Staples.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Supreme Love Project. This is Janine Staples, your host. You have tuned in to the Cold Crush teleseminar, and we have another fantastic coach here with us today, Amy Smith of the Joy Junkie. Wow, hard for me to get it out. Amy Smith of the Joy Junkie. Amy, welcome to the Supreme Love Project.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm very honored to be with you and hang out.
I am too. So everybody listening in from all over the world, I was just on thejoyjunkie.com looking at Amy Smith's stuff. I downloaded her free ebook, and I am gearing up and ready to go. I'm so excited that you're a part of the Supreme Love Project. I'm so excited that you're here to share your wisdom, your story, all of your strategies, perspectives, and encouragement for how basically to do what this summit is all about, which is crushing some of the cold that has been built up around a woman's soul. We're all about helping women to understand what it means to build intimacy with themselves and with other people, and defining what that looks like for ourselves so that we can have the connections and the friendships, the relationships that we're really hungry and thirsty for. So Cold Crush is all about creating space, creating bridges, melting away some of those barriers and those blocks to real deep connection that we so want as women. So Amy, what I'd like to do is just create some space for you to tell us who you are, where you come from, and how did you come into the work that you're doing right now?
Oh my goodness, how much time do you have? I have quite a vast history, but I'll give you sort of the Cliff Notes version. I was working in a corporate environment. I was a corporate trainer for a prestige makeup brand in the early 2000s, and did all the things, checked off all of the boxes, had the big girl job, all of that fancy stuff, and was kind of dying a slow death. And at the time, my husband knew that I was really hungry for a new path. But I had a really great thing going for me, so I knew that if I made, a major jump, I wanted it to be for something that I was really passionate about and the next major chapter of my life. So he came home one day and he was like, babe, I just heard this person on the radio and their job is exactly what you need to be doing. They were a life coach. And it didn't have as much of the catchphrase as it does now, and I kind of was going, oh my gosh, I need to check it out. He was so convicted that he had actually sent off for information from a coaching school because he was so convinced that I needed to do this program. And that really kind of began my journey into personal development, and it really catapulted from there. But I ended up leaving my corporate job. It's a long, sordid story in itself, but began really focusing on this idea that we can actually create the life that we want. And I think it's so interesting with this idea of cold crush that we're conditioned to be icy. We're conditioned to have our walls up. I mean, everything in our society says, hey, women, you want to be successful? You need to be like a man. You need to not cry. And so we're kind of dismantling all of these societal stigmas and triggers throughout our entire adulthood and going, wait a minute, I checked off all these boxes. I've done all these things. I've had the kids. I bought the house. I had the career. Why am I not happy? So, and that was very much my situation, and that's what really landed me in the lap of personal development. And then as I started working with clients, and gosh, it's been well over a decade now, but as I started, working with clients and talking with them, I had started off with a niche that was focused heavily on relationships. And as my business began to unfold, I started really noticing that so much of all issues were related to the value that people found in their own voice. So their ability to speak up if something felt unsettling in their relationship, or if their in-laws were meddling into how they were rearing their children. And the ability to one, find value in their own voice. There's this huge self-worth element. And then two, how to adequately and accurately express yourself in an articulate way without being mean. So that's kind of how the evolution of the Joy Junkie brand has really become all about finding your voice and using it. And a lot of that has to do with kind of what we're talking about today, which is our tendency to people please.
Yeah, and so that really actually leads me into the first question. That's a really powerful story, and I'm glad that your husband came home from work that day and said, hey, I figured out what you need to be doing with your life. I'm really happy for all of us. And so that leads us into that people-pleasing thing. That's so sort of an endemic issue for womanhood. There are so many of us who are born as girls, raised up to be women, to think about other people first and to put ourselves last on the list. So talk to us more about that. What is the biggest reason people feel the constant need to please other people?
Well, we can certainly look at our physiological makeup and sort of the evolution of man, and that, in our ancestors actually needed to belong to a group in order to survive, right? So we see these sorts of things that have evolved over time where our need to belong to an organization or a group no longer dictates our actual survival, our life and death. But we still feel this pull, like I need these people to approve of me, or I need these people to not be mad at me at the very least in order to survive. So I like to kind of put that out there because there is this biological pull that we have that is incredibly subconscious. It's not, we don't go into our life going, okay, in order for me to survive or feel like I'm not having impending doom, I need to make sure all these people in my life like me. So it's an element of giving yourself a bit of compassion. But there's two other major reasons that I think people feel compelled to please others. And I really think that they're fallacies that we're totally bought into based off of our societal conditioning and our upbringing, our families of origin, and a lot of the things that are impressed upon us as women in our youth. And that is, if I speak up for myself or if I give voice to something, then I'm being a bitch. We equate it with being snarky, being awful, being a shrew, right? And the other is, if I speak up for myself, then I'm purposely inflicting pain on someone. So things like, well, I could never tell my spouse how I feel about stuff in the bedroom. That would destroy him. Or I could never tell my mom I don't believe in, the religion I was raised in. That would destroy her. And we take this responsibility of malice when there's no malicious intent. We're not actually hurting somebody. We're actually just taking care of self. So I do think that those are two things that we really buy into, is that there's this equivalent of I speak up, I hurt others, or I'm being a bitch, So,
Yeah, and I can hear what you're saying, and I'm thinking about my own life, and I think about the clients that I work with, and some of the conflict is around what you just named, sort of our religious background and how we're brought up, some of our socialization, and how we're taught to think of ourselves as good girls, as good women, as worthy of love, of respect, of appreciation. It only comes through deference. It only comes through giving our power away. We have to be, in a lot of frameworks, docile, menial, subservient, and really, really sort of squishy, and doormat prone in order to be seen as sweet, as sweetness and light. And so many of us want desperately to be sweetness and light. I spent a lot of years wanting to be sweetness and light. And so I understand the kind of pain that comes from that conflict of knowing that pleasing other people despite oneself will only lead to self-erasure. You know, it basically means that a woman is disappearing herself. She's slowly, you know, wasting away emotionally and socially and spiritually. So, you know, it's a really sad situation when you think about it. And I think what I help women do, and what I think you're doing, Amy, right now, is giving us a picture of what the effects look like. I mean, I think women can feel the effects when you put other people before yourself constantly. You can feel it, but we have to also realize what it looks like. I mean, it looks like a really duplicitous life. It looks like really great conflict. It looks like a woman who's not well known. What I've learned, and I would like to hear your thoughts about this, Amy, what I've learned is women who put themselves last on their list are usually harboring such deep rage and such powerful resentment and bitterness. They're almost like powder kegs. And the thing is, the reason I use the word duplicitous is because the people around them often would not guess as much because they're such good performers. You know what I mean? So that's a really big consequence. That's a really big consequence. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what does it mean to be in that space of performance and lies that really is a consequence of putting yourself last in every way, in every relationship, in every situation? You know, how does that have an effect on our lives, on our bodies, on our hearts, on our minds?
Oh my goodness, it's truly endless. But I often will say, constantly putting other people before yourself is poison disguised as nobility, because we think that we are being so noble. Because we're trained that way. Again, if we talk about this antiquated idea of womanhood, and that we need to be don't rock the boat, always be sweet, always be kind, and all of these things, what we end up doing is we're sending this very, very pervasive message to ourselves that everybody else's wants, opinions, and desires are more important than our wants, opinions, and desires. So that speaks volumes to our own version of self-worth. So not only are we bitter and angry at everything else in our lives, and, you know, like this powder keg, like you were saying, but we're also self-loathing because we're perpetuating this idea that we don't matter as much. So it becomes an incredibly lonely existence. So the cost, what I want people to see is, as uncomfortable as it is to begin to flex the muscle of speaking up for yourself, it's incredibly painful to stay the same, where you don't love yourself and you don't believe you're worthy of giving voice to things. And one of the other things that I think is really worth underlining is it's not one or the other. It's not, I get to be, you know, feminine and soft and sweet and lovely, or I'm an aggressive bitch. No, we get to be all of those things because we are so versatile and incredible as women that there is a way to be sweet and assertive. At the exact same time. That's the power of womanhood. When you learn to do your womanhood differently, when you learn to do your womanhood powerfully, when you learn to do your womanhood from your feminine center, there are very few, if any, limitations to your manifestation. I mean, you can be incredibly sensuous, sexual, alluring, enticing. You can be chaste and simple and modest. You can be really aggressive and assertive, which are not the same thing, and, you know, a forerunner, a pioneer, or you can be really laid back. You can, like, sort of lean out and let someone else take charge. You can do the fullness of yourself when you are honest with yourself. You can do the fullness of yourself when you value yourself. And I want to say this thing, Amy, and I really like to hear your thoughts about this. I had to learn how to do my womanhood differently. It wasn't just something that I was going to figure out. I just wrote a blog post called Time Don't Heal Shit. And that's a saying that my dad used to say, time don't heal shit. And it wasn't until I got to be grown up that I realized the longer that I waited for just me to mature
into honesty, like having emotional integrity or having my own back or developing really healthy boundaries or practicing my own voice, the longer I was going to wait. It's not something that just time passing is going to like magically manifest for you. It takes a very serious, pronounced, declared intention to do your womanhood differently. The power structures that be are so strong. If a woman doesn't make a very clear intention to do her womanhood differently, it's very likely that she'll just be swept up into the sexualization of things. What do you think about it?
Absolutely. And I think that it's like anything else that we become a student of or we become deliberate about. Like you could decide that you really want to get healthy, you want to become really strong, and so you just entertain this idea of, oh, maybe I'll just read a book about Pilates. And it's like, no. That doesn't work. You actually have to hit the mat and do something differently. And so I think we've also gotten into this place, I see this a lot in my work and in personal development, is we become consumers of information and then we forget to actually implement it because we're talking about something that's very conceptual. We're talking about changing your thought process, how you speak to yourself, the ideologies under which you operate. So it feels vague. So people listen to podcasts or they, will consume it and then they forget to actually speak up in the moment when they feel as though they've been wronged or there's a situation that is abhorrent to them. And so we forget in the moment to actually speak to ourselves the way that we want to speak to ourselves. So that's another element of it is we can't just consume. We actually have to do and be different. And I think that it's sometimes challenging in personal development, again, because it's of and related to spirit, right? It's a little bit more heady, conceptual. So it's hard to say, what are my actual tangible steps, which is a lot of what I do, is I try to create a lot of formulas, steps, check-in practices, things like that, so that we can make it more tangible and actually do and become different and live into that new definition of womanhood that we consciously choose. Yeah.
It's about doing your womanhood differently. I keep saying the phrase over and over again, and it does take practice. And that's one of the reasons, throughout the Supreme Love Projects, whatever product we're producing for women for free to go out and use at their will, to share at their will, this is all for free. And it will get you far. It will provide insights just to do the work of setting that intention and having accountability created in place for you and a community. You really need a coach and you really need a network of like-minded friends to go against the current and the grain to set up that practice. And so, there's going to come a time when the free resources run out. They're going to be great to set you up. So open you up to get you thinking, but when you really want to live your life differently, in day-to-day, hour by hour, minute by minute life, you've got to have some help. You really need some help. The current is too big to do it on your own. So I want to ask you, Amy, about the next question, which has to do with intention. And you say something really powerful, which is that we need to be responsible for our intention, not our reception. So can you tell us more about that and how it can help us to free ourselves from people-pleasing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I realized that a lot of the angst and really the unrest and unhappiness that a lot of my clients and students were experiencing was because a lot of their investment was in how they were being received instead of who they were actually being. So their focus was always external. How is this landing over there? What does my mom think of me? What do my children think of me? What do my in-laws? What do my boss, spouse, etc.? On and on and on. And so there was this external focus of trying to get all these various parties to accept them and love them or approve of them. And I really wanted people to start changing their barometer of success and start looking at our baseline is who we are being. Are we proud? I mean, something I ask myself all the time is, how do I need to behave in order to be proud of the woman that I am? So I'll give you a really great example. I did a political podcast 2 episodes ago, and it was very much kind of slanted towards my particular political beliefs. However, it was extremely positive. It was all about unity and understanding one another and handling ourselves with grace and kindness. Very little policy or candidacy was even discussed on the podcast. So I blast it like I normally do. I broadcast it and I promote it, and there was a handful of people who really applauded it and said, thank you, oh my gosh, I'm so glad. There was a handful of people who were like, unsubscribe, I'm out of here, and hated it, so that they received it in a different way, although they did not actually listen. They just, it was just their gut response to the fact that I offered a polarized topic out there. They immediately, had these scathing comments. And then there was a whole bunch of people who just didn't even open the email. They didn't care. So my responsibility is to look at, did I handle myself in a way in which I am proud? What was my intention? Was my intention to hurt or scar anyone? Did I do anything or be anything that I wasn't proud of? Would I do it differently? And it was no, it was absolutely not. I am so happy with the woman that I was, with the message that I shared. So my focus was on who I was being, my intention, not my reception. Because if I was so focused on making everybody else happy, I would go batshit crazy, because there's no way I can do that. There is no way that I could make sure that it landed perfectly for every single person who viewed it or who heard about it. So the same is true for us in our day in and day out lives. We think oftentimes, if I go into this conversation with my mom, or if I go into this conversation with my spouse, it'll be successful as long as they approve of me or as long as they see it my way. We have zero control over that. The only thing we can do is focus on who we are being in those moments. So that's why I always have this sort of hybrid of the things that will make me proud of me are if I handle myself with grace and kindness, a huge cornerstone of my business, paired with assertiveness, because it's very important to me to never allow my silence to make me a liar, or my silence to make it seem as though I agree or support or, am compliant with something that's in direct contrast to who I want to be in this world. So that's it's a game changer, because you start looking internally as your barometer instead of externally as your barometer of success.
Yeah. And I applaud you. I think that's a powerful, beautiful example. And it's a really helpful distinction. I find, Amy, that what a lot of us as women, I remember being in my spin cycle of pain for years before I found Supreme Love, which is the framework that I advocate to do a deep excavation of the soul to heal your belief system. Before I found it, what I was doing a lot was getting caught in those split hairs, what you just described. Like, I was thinking, I really want these people to think well of me. So how do I control my voice or my thoughts to the extent that they're going to feel comfortable with me, or they're going to maybe even agree with me or validate me or consign me? Because what I was doing was basically living out my codependent creed. And what I discovered was that as long as I was making other people my point of pleasure, I was going to have 1,000 million moving parts day of my life.
Yes.
Day of my life. Because the people in front of me changed. They changed. It would one day be it would one day be my partner. The next day it would be my students. The next day after that it would be my supervisor. The following day it would be a client. The next day it would be like a television producer. It's not a way to live. That's a way to go insane. But if you can anchor as a woman, if you can get really clear about your core values, your principles, and then you can set your intention, like you said, in such a way that agrees with your core values and principles so that you can, again, back to point one, feel satisfied, please yourself, be really proud of who you are, feel really confident and good that you have honored your promises to yourself, and make that your beacon of light, make your internal constitution your buoy in the ocean. Then you can move through life with a course. as opposed to just being volleyed around by all these tossed weights.
That's right. And what that essentially does is that it makes our happiness and our fulfillment, which is what we all want, right? Like, we know our human drivers are the pursuit of pleasure, the avoidance of pain. It's very simple. What we all want is we just want to be happy. But we continue to postpone happiness if we say, the only way I can be happy is if this person loves me, or this person accepts me, or these people think I'm a genius colleague, or that my kids think I'm, phenomenal. And then we change the criterion. So as soon as somebody does accept us or doesn't accept us, then we move on to another set of criteria. Now it's got to be this person who loves me, or now I need to accomplish this thing that's outside of myself. So that is very much a fundamental switch of where you come from. And so it's starting to really cultivate this relationship with self so that you can navigate everything outside of yourself without being so invested and have your happiness being contingent on all of those things having a very specific result. And that's something that, I don't know about you, but it has taken me, decades to unpack. So, I share this stuff with you sounding so affirmative, but please know that this took years and years and years to unravel, and my job is not done. Like, we continue to work. And the same way, you get really healthy, you don't just let your diet go to shit, you don't just stop working out, you maintain. Yeah. So you continue to work with a coach. Yeah.
That's right. I have a coach. Amy, do you have a coach?
I do. Yes. I'm talking to her actually right when we end. I have a session with my coach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I talked to my coach this morning. Yeah, the coaches have coaches, ladies. We're not ever done with this work. I think what you're saying, Amy, is so crucial. And the point is, if you don't have a coach, if you don't have a community, if you don't have someone to hold you accountable, to provide you with new frameworks, to even sometimes give you permission to let go of your old patterns, to say it's okay, to release that. It's okay maybe to let go of that person, that relationship, that pattern, that habit. It will take you 2, 3, 4, 5 times as long to break out of some of those old patterns and those chains that hold you back and that weigh you down. And here's the truth, and the sad thing is sometimes, Amy, you might not ever. If you don't have a serious intentional investment in yourself to get this understanding, you might not ever. I've known women in the Supreme Love Project who are in their 70s, and that's not by any stretch of the imagination old. I think you're not old until you're like 90. I feel like old is earned. That term is earned when you're about 90. So when you're 70, you're still a hot mama. Like, you're still good to go. And I feel like I've met enough women in their 70s in the Supreme Love Project who are just like, yeah, I did the thing. I did what I was told to do. I got married. I had kids. My husband died. My kids are gone. The dog is dead. Now, who am I? Like, where do I go from here? What do I do? I don't even know, like, how to be. And so don't be fooled into thinking that you're going to have it all figured out, just by the passing of time. And don't be fooled and think you're going to have it figured out, without some support. So I want to talk, now, Amy, about boundaries. Because all that we're talking about, the level of, work you got to do to, like, get through your trauma bonds, like, name these parts of yourself that you've avoided and abandoned, and do the work of stabilizing new practices. How important are boundaries in your life while you're doing this work? What are boundaries, and how do you get them?
Awesome question. This is probably one of my favorite topics. So a boundary is very simply a fierce choice about what you will no longer tolerate. Yeah. And this can be behavioral, it can be verbal, it can be relationships, it can be all across the board. But I think that it's one of those things that becomes imperative once you start doing this work, once you start realizing that there are unhealthy forces that are arresting your ability to connect further and further with your own self and your womanhood. So I have kind of a 3-step process to figuring out boundaries. So first of all, well, prior to even getting into that 3-step, the best place to search out, and this really piggybacks on what you were talking about earlier, the best place to search out where you might need to establish a boundary is the stuff that you complain about all the time. Because a lot of times, you know, how you were saying being a keg and you're pissed and, you know, you're about to explode, and maybe you're furious at your mother, but she has no idea, but your spouse gets an earful about it. It's all the shit we complain about, but we're not willing to give voice to. So that's a great avenue to start searching out, what do I bitch about? Because I love to say, if it's worth complaining about, it's probably worth taking action on. But that action is what we are so deterred from, because it means that we're going to have challenging conversations. So we choose the opposite. We choose the pain, and we choose to complain and be a victim and render ourselves powerless. So once you've kind of identified, here's what I complain about, here's what I've never given voice to, here's what I don't articulate, then you do this sort of 3-step process. The first is to decide on the boundary. And that is really, there's a piece to that in deciding something that is extremely qualifiable and quantifiable. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of times we say things like to our spouse, I really need more romance. But you don't explain exactly what that means to you. Is that initiating sex more? Is that I want flowers? Is that date night? Or I really want you to do a lot more work around the house. Well, what does that mean? Is that trash 3 days a week? Is that hire a house cleaner? Like, what does that really mean? So same is true for boundaries. If there's something that you need to give voice to, you need to be very clear if the boundary gets infringed. So it needs to be extremely specific. Here is what I will no longer tolerate, or here is what I am specifically asking for from you. The second piece is to deliver it. And this is usually what takes the most guts. This is what we are so terrified to do. And sometimes it's really messy. And one of the things that I use all the time is stating my intention when I deliver a boundary. So to say, please know it's not my intention at all to hurt your feelings, or it's not my intention at all to fill in the blank. But here is what I'm requesting. Here's what I'm asking for of you. And to deliver it, to be very cognizant of your delivery. Because there are times, I think, when we speak up, but we do it in a way in which we can't be heard. You know, we're screaming and yelling, or we're being extremely vitriolic. And the other party can't hear us because they're worried about defending themselves. So when you deliver the boundary, again, saying it with the utmost grace and kindness. And I use that terminology to speak to kindness being the actual words you say, and grace being kind of your paraverbal skills, or how you deliver, actually the inflection and tone in your voice. And then the final thing, which you may or may not have to do, depending on how it's received, is you have to be ready to enforce the boundary. And that can be an internal conversation of, if it's not adhered to, I'm going to give them 3 more chances, or I'm going to make a mention 2 more times of what I need them to follow through on, and then it'll be an ultimatum. So you don't necessarily have to establish a boundary and give an ultimatum right away. Sometimes it's just knowing in your head what you're willing to do going forward if they don't abide by it. So that's kind of a little snapshot of a way in which you can operate establishing some boundaries in your life.
Yeah, and so that's beautiful, Amy. And I got a really great picture. Your program really reflects and mirrors my program, and I like what you did there, and I hope that our listeners are really tuned in. That's what you did was about being super specific. Because I used to get tripped up on boundaries a lot. First of all, in 2 ways, and someone listening might realize that they're tripped up too. I used to think boundaries were only physical. I used to think it meant about, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want you encroaching on my space. Like, I don't want you to touch me. You know what I mean? In a certain way. Maybe it's sexual. I don't want you to touch me in a certain way. Or maybe it's just social. I didn't realize for a long, long time that boundaries were emotional, that they were relational, that if I were all alone in my house or in my office and I was feeling angry or fuming or, just really pissed off or really unseen or unheard, that was a signifier of a boundary violation. Nobody in the room, but my boundaries were accosted because I had not established them. Someone had stood me up, or someone had not fulfilled a promise, or someone had, maybe gossiped about me behind my back. And because I didn't have clear boundaries that were physical and emotional and sexual and social, so that people understood what was acceptable in my reality and what's not acceptable in my reality, I didn't realize I needed all of those different types of boundaries. And I also didn't realize that I needed to be very specific. Yes. I feel really, really needy right now, or I feel really detached. Like you said, I need more romance, and my boundary is, when I will allow a partner in my space, when he is able to speak to me in a certain way, maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time, and that's with kindness and respect and with very focused attention. So my boundary is that people who do not speak to me that way are not eligible for partnership. And that lessens the opportunities for me to feel violated or let down or, this lack of connection and romance.
Right.
Am I understanding
it
right?
just gives you so much more power.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're deciding that. And you're the one establishing it and delivering it instead of just hope people be what I need.
Right.
Hope everyone just does magically what I need, and I hope my spouse is a mind reader. I hope my mom's a mind reader. No.
Yep. Yeah. And I can tell you stories. We don't have time because I'm going to get to this last question because we both have other things that are going on we need to get to, but this is the last question. I just want to say I can tell stories about me and about other people who were close to me in my life with zero boundaries and thought that everyone needed to be a mind reader or everyone just needed to be good or whatever that means or should know better. So let's talk a little bit about the power of no in setting good boundaries. So what is your best tool to help us to start saying no to things or people we do not want in our life?
Yes. Oh, I love this. Okay, so the best tip that I have around this is to buy yourself some time, and I'm going to explain that in a second. But first, some context. I think one of the things that we have very, very emphatically as women in our world is this reflex to saying yes. I used to have a colleague out here in California who would call it being the totally girl, from California. We'd say, totally. Can you do this for me? Oh, totally. Oh my gosh. Yes. Totally. And we become this yes woman, right? Where it becomes reflex to just acquiesce instead of to be really thoughtful about what we're saying yes to. Because a lot of times when we say yes, we are inevitably saying no to something else. We might be saying no to some downtime, no to rest, no to positive relationships we're trying to build. There's always a trade-off when we adopt something into our world that's going to take up more time and energy. So especially if this is habitual and something that you've done chronically for decades upon decades, the first step is to stop the reflex of just saying yes. So if you can just buy yourself some time, you can start to be a little bit more thoughtful about what you're saying yes to. So I often will say, if somebody is asking hey, would you be able to bake 400 cupcakes for this event coming up next week? Instead of just saying yes, saying, how soon do you need my answer? Or I'm going to need to get back to you on that. Or, you know what, I'm going to need to double check my calendar. But you can always be gracious. I always express gratitude. Thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm deeply honored. In order to come through for you as best I can, I really need to make sure I have the ability in my schedule. How soon do you need to know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a shit what you say, just don't say yes. I mean, even if you're like, can you hold that thought? I need to go to the restroom real quick. Just get some time
Yeah.
to start unpacking what this choice really means for your life.
Right.
So that's my favorite little tool.
That is so good. Okay. We've got to, okay, so listen, this has been so good. I could probably talk to you for another hour. But what I want to do right now is create some space now for you to give us 3 parting gifts. This information is chock full in this interview. We need 3 parting gifts for our guests so that we can get off this call, walk away from this podcast, and start to implement some strategies immediately. What do you have?
Absolutely. All right. So the first one is going to be, the first 2 are going to be sort of questions to ponder, and I highly suggest taking pen to paper and getting them out of your head if possible, like really journaling around them. The first one is, where am I attached to my reception instead of my intention? Where and with whom? So it could be like, I'm always really concerned with how I'm received at work, or so that might be where you tend to be caught up in how people perceive you and receive you. Or it could be very specific people, like I'm always concerned what my sister thinks of me, or I'm always concerned with my children. And furthermore, what's that costing you? Right? I want to really shine the light on where it's really infringing on your happiness. So that's the first thing. Where am I so focused on my reception and not as much on my intention? Because remember, again, we have 0 control over the reception. We have 100% control over the intention.
Right.
The second question is, I would start a boundaries conversation with yourself of, where in my life do I constantly complain about something that I have chosen not to take action on? And start having that conversation with yourself of, what are these things that have really been infringing on my happiness that I have been pissed about and bitching about, but have done 0 to change that story?
Right.
So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is a commitment. The third thing is just a choice and a commitment that the next time somebody asks something of you, invites you to something, whatever it might be, and your instinct is just to say yes, I want you to commit to buying yourself some time. I want you to commit to just saying, let me think about it, let me check my schedule, how soon do you need to know? Anything besides just saying yes.
Got it. That makes sense. That sounds great. That's wonderful, Amy. I've written them down. I hope that everyone of the Supremes have written them down. I hope everyone who's a Joy Junkie has written them down, and everyone else who's from all over the world who is listening. Amy Smith from thejoyjunkie.com, you have been fantastic. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Supreme Love Project. We're going to have you back for sure.
Oh, I'd be most honored.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, listen up. You know the drill. Take this message to heart. Build it into your body. Listen over and over and over and over again. Let it sink into your soul. And we will see you on the next episode of the Supreme Love Project. Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating in the Supreme Love Project. We're a division of Literacy for Life, LLC. Please visit thesupremeloveproject.com for more information about our products and services. Visit JanineStaples.com for more information about our beloved founder and president. And remember, take this message to heart and build it into your body. We'll see you next time, right here. The place to make love, not war, every day of your life.